In my mind, the sound of December is the sound of bells. Bells of all kinds. Church bells, sleigh bells, harness bells, bells on Christmas trees. I always put bells on the bottom of my Christmas tree to let me know if my kids were messing around under the Christmas tree. Bells on bobtail nags, whatever that means. Well, it sounds festive anyway. All kinds of bells. Today, the Storytellers of San Diego are bringing you some stories and songs about bells. Stories from history, stories from folklore, legends. We'll have stories from Jim Dykman, from Pamela Reinigal, from Eric George Tauber, and from Patty Christensen, and from me, Marilyn McPhie. And there's one more thing that I hope will, so to speak, ring a bell. And that's that we do this in conjunction with Eclipse Chocolate Bar and Bistro in South Park, San Diego. If you're local, you can swing on by for some chocolate. Have you tried their cupcakes? If not, you should. And if you're not local, well, you can go online and order, and all that deliciousness can be shipped to you. If you want to know more about what we're doing in Storytellers of San Diego, some upcoming programs, you can check our website, which is storytellersofsandiego.org. And if you want to see more stories that we've recorded from past performances, look for us on our YouTube channel. So enjoy the stories of bells. I will show you some of mine. Bells that came from a German medieval market. Lovely, right? So enjoy the stories. As we say in Storytellers of San Diego, don't miss a word. Once, many, many years ago, there was a young woodcutter. He lived in a small cottage near the woods. The woods were filled with oak and pine and beech and all kinds of trees that provided excellent wood for his projects. One day, he was out in the forest and he was looking for just the right tree to make a table. As he walked and looked and walked and looked, he found himself in a part of the forest that he seldom went to. And just as he spotted the perfect tree, he heard the calling of a bird. Now, this wasn't unusual. The woods were full of birds, sparrows and hawks and jays. He recognized this call as the call of a magpie. And soon he saw what the situation was. On a branch of the tree, the very tree he was intending to cut down, there was a nest. And in the nest there were 3 young magpies. And there was the mother magpie circling around the nest, calling out in alarm. He could see why. Because slithering up the trunk of that tree was a large snake. Quickly and almost instinctively, the woodcutter picked up his axe and, well, soon the snake was dead and the birds were saved. And then he looked at them again and he realized that he had saved them from one predator, and he thought perhaps it would be good if he saved them from another predator himself. And so he decided not to cut down that tree, but to look for another one. And he went on his way with a smile. 3 years passed, and one day the woodcutter was again looking for just the right tree. He was going to be married in a few weeks, and he wanted to make a nice wedding chest for his bride-to-be. He walked along and soon found himself in that very same part of the forest where he had saved the magpies so long ago. And thinking about that, he smiled to himself. And then perhaps he was thinking about the magpies, or perhaps he was thinking about his wedding and his bride-to-be. But he wasn't paying attention. And he looked around and realized that he wasn't exactly sure where he was. Surely he had come from this direction and he was going this direction, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe he'd been walking in circles. He was lost. And then it started to get dark, and a thick mist started to rise, and the woodcutter began to panic. He was lost in the woods, and it was getting dark. He spied a light glimmering through the trees, and he was relieved. Perhaps there was a house, and perhaps there would be a place for him to spend the night, and he could get his bearings in the morning. So he made his way to that house. It was a large, very grand house. He was surprised. He had never seen the house before, and he hadn't heard of any house like that being in the forest. But he knocked at the door. The door was answered by a beautiful young woman. She took one look at him, and she said, "Ah, you must be lost." He said, "Indeed I am." She said, "And then you are probably also hungry and thirsty and tired." "Yes," he said, "all of those." "Well," she said, "come inside and sit by the fire, and I will get you something to eat." Soon he was sitting before a warm fire, and the young woman brought him a tray of delicious food. And now warm and with his hunger satisfied, the woodcutter yawned, and the young woman showed him to a guest room. Soon he was lying on a soft bed surrounded by piles of blankets and pillows. He fell asleep almost immediately, but in the middle of the night he awoke with a start. He could scarcely breathe. There seemed to be something that was pressing on his chest. Opening his eyes, he saw that there was a snake coiled around his body. And looking at that snake, he was certain that the snake and the young woman were the same. "What is the meaning of this?" he said. And the snake spoke. "I have waited for 3 years for this, and now I will take my revenge." "Revenge?" she said. "But why? Surely I have not hurt you." "Ah, but surely you have. Do you remember the snake that you killed 3 years ago? That snake was my son. You killed my son, and now I will kill you." "Oh," said the woodcutter, "I beg you, spare my life." The snake responded, "Well, perhaps I will give you a chance to save yourself, which is certainly more than you gave my son. In the woods not far from here, there is an ancient church, just ruins, but there is a bell tower, and in the bell tower there is a bell. If you can ring that bell 3 times before dawn, I will let you go." "I'll do it," said the woodcutter. "Just show me which direction is the ruin, which direction is the bell tower." "Oh," said the snake, "you may not leave this room." "But then how can I ring the bell?" "That is not my problem." And so the man lay back in the bed, and the snake coiled itself at the foot of the bed, and together the woodcutter and the snake waited for dawn and death. Just as the sky was beginning to lighten a bit, the woodcutter heard it. It was faint but unmistakable. It was the sound of a bell ringing, and it rang once, twice, thrice. The snake uncoiled itself, writhed, and disappeared into a thick mist. The woodcutter breathed a sigh of relief, and his first thought was, "Who rang the bell? I must see." And so, following the sound of the bell, he went in that direction, and he found the ruined church, the bell tower. He climbed the steps up to the top of the bell tower, and there was the bell, and he saw that it was smeared with blood, and lying beneath the bell were the bodies of 3 magpies. He was certain that those were surely the magpies that he had saved so long ago. As he gazed at them, he realized that they were stunned and they were injured, but they were still alive. And so he gathered them up gently and took them back to his cottage. And in the weeks that followed, he cared for the injured magpies while he worked on the chest for his bride-to-be. Finally, the chest was finished, and the magpies were well. And on the day of his wedding, the woodcutter and his new bride released the magpies into the air, where they circled around the couple once, twice, thrice, and then flew away. And the woodcutter and his bride, and presumably the magpies, lived happily ever after.